Hi, everybody. Just checking if we've got audio for everybody. So I just want to let my folks in the panel know we've got audio, so that's great. So I think what we'll do is kick off. So I just want to say a warm welcome to everybody for today. What we're going to be talking about today in our ongoing series about unified service management is value streams. Okay, we're talking about streamlining workflows, customer journeys, value streams, and capabilities with USM, so unified service management. So crafting and delivering a great customer journey relies on clear, well-defined processes, streamlined workflows, and value streams, as well as the proper capabilities. Today, we're going to be talking about all of that good stuff. Shanice and Blanche are over in the social chat, so please let them both know your name and the city from where you're joining. It's interactive, this event, so please do get involved in the chat. Okay? And if you have any questions for the panel, feel free to enter them into the chat, and our team will get them over to us to answer live during the show. We really do have a great panel of experts today to answer all of your questions during the live show. So let's jump right in and meet them. And I just want to give a warm welcome back to everybody. First off is Jan. So Jan is an enterprise service management architect and safe to say the father of USM and the author of more than 100 management books with thousands of authors and reviewers in it. And his latest book is all about USM, an introduction to the USM method. So welcome, Jan. Great to have you on the show.
Hey, thank you. Nice to be here. And again, add to the demystification of a lot of complex terminology.
Yeah, absolutely. The demystification of complex terminology is what this is all about. Okay? Yeah. So, John has over 40 years experience in the IT industry. And I mean, I know that doesn't say a lot about how old we all are on this panel. There's a fair amount of us who've been around a few years. But it's safe to say that in those 2 decades, he has done literally everything there is to do in sales, business development, IT service management. So he brings a wealth of experience. And welcome back, John.
Thanks, Nigel.
Good to have you again. Peter is a dedicated trainer, coach, facilitator, and he specializes in enhancing team dynamics and optimizing organizational architecture. I think team building, conflict resolution, strategic planning are some of his passions, but obviously service management with USM. So welcome back again, Peter.
Yeah, looking forward. And it's already episode number 5, I think.
It is indeed. Yeah, we are already on episode 5. I know. It's quite straight. It's gone so quickly. And I'd like to have a warm welcome to Klaus. Klaus is an IT expert, and he has a deep experience in IT operations, business process management, projects, app development. And he also lectures in USM, which is really, really interesting. And I think his career is in roles like service manager, IT service manager, project manager, business IT architect, and so on. And it's his first appearance on the panel today. So Klaus, welcome.
Thank you, and hello from Düsseldorf in Germany.
Fantastic. So without further ado, I think let's just welcome some of our guests. We've got a lot of people online today already. I think tons of you from all over the world. We've got Ida from Switzerland, and nice to have you here as well to see the Swiss in. We've got people, Donabet is back again. Great to see you on the show again, Donabet. Jose from Portugal, Aureline Will from the UK, we've got people from all over, Netherlands, everywhere. So really great to have you all on the show today. Don't forget, we just need to get your questions in early, please, because usually everybody waits until the 11th hour, and we have 3 minutes left to answer 12 questions. Okay, so please get them in early so that our team can get them over to the panel and we can get you those answers. All right, so I think for the first thing that I'd like to do is just to say we're going to be talking about this diagram quite a bit today. All right, so this is the background really of what today's event is all about. And this is the agree, change, recover, operate, and improve model from USM. So I'm just putting it on screen for everybody to remind you from the previous episodes that a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about today will follow this diagram in terms of processes. All right, so let's have a look today then. What is our first question for today? And the first question for today is, how does USM handle the concept of a workflow? So Jan, if you don't mind, we're going to start off with you.
Yeah, well, if you look at terminology, I think USM makes a point of making that very, very clear, very specific, and very pure. So if you look at the concept of a workflow, we tend to define that at the dimension of the process, which means that if you look at the previous image, and now I think you've got another image for the composed workflows, and normally people look at a process as a start, something that happens, and an end. And in this process model, for instance, those are independent containers. Well, in USM, this is quite different. Our way of looking at processes is that we have made this a non-redundant process model. And that means that if you look at, for instance, the change management process, it requires operate to do anything. Change is just about preparing stuff. It's a paper tiger. So the concept of a workflow is the flow of work, not by specifying who executes that series of activities, not by explaining the means, the technology stuff that people use, just the dimension of the activity. And that means that in USM, any workflow is composed of these building blocks. And that, yeah, this is a nice image of the building blocks. Now, the top image of this tool shows you how a concept of a process only covers one color of the integrated system. The bottom image shows you how the concept of a workflow is determined at the level of process, but is now composed of multiple building blocks, makes it an end-to-end delivery of something that is triggered by a customer and then delivered to a customer, including all these steps in between. Now, that is what we call a workflow, which is composed of multiple building blocks of the type of process. So it's in the same dimension, but it doesn't specify who does it. Otherwise, it would become a procedure. It doesn't say how that is done in terms of instructions, because that would turn it into a work instruction. Now, that's how USM creates a very clear definition of the concept of a workflow only composed of process dimension, which is activity dimension.
Fantastic. I think that makes perfect sense to me. And I think the difference between a process procedure and a work instruction is something that is really critical, that everybody needs to understand, right? Because I think a lot of people tend to get those two things confused, Jan. Is that what your experience has been?
Absolutely. I think the term process together with the term service is one of the two most abused terms throughout the management field in any line of business.
I think you are absolutely right there. John, you want to add something to this, I think.
No, I think Jan is exactly right. I think when people use the term workflow, they tend to use it like they use the word process. They refer to any work stream, right? And you know, as you drill down into workflows using the commonly used understanding of it, they get more and more tailored to unique requirements. The USM workflows are based on this non-redundant process model, which means they're generic workflows that everyone can use regardless of whatever practices or tools that they're using. And so, since one of the goals of value stream mapping is to reduce waste, the concept of a generic non-redundant USM workflows, I think, has a significant impact, or can have a significant impact. And,
fantastic. Thanks, John. Klaus, would you like to add something in?
Yes. As Jan already said, the USM workflows are based on a non-redundant model. So, and if you would have a Lean Six Sigma project on this, which the goal of Lean Six Sigma is to remove waste, and the workflows cannot be simplified anymore in USM, so you wouldn't have much to do in an USM organized company. So to me, this is the basis of the USM workflows.
Right, which makes perfect sense. Peter, why don't you finish us off on this?
Yeah, well, I think I would recommend people to look at the previous episode number 4, where we explained the logic behind the USM process model and the processes within the model, and how helpful it is to have a clear understanding of what a process is. Because as Jan mentioned also earlier, if you mix it up with procedure, work instruction, then you end up in a chaotic situation. My main message is, if you want to help your organization, start with a glossary, and so that it's clear what you mean, for example, with a process. So USM is also a strong way to reduce misunderstanding in your organization.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. It is a really good way to reduce misunderstanding. Okay, and one thing I want to mention to everybody out there, there is a fantastic wiki, okay, which USM has, and there's a QR code on screen at the moment. So you just need to scan that, and you will get access straight to the USM wiki, where you will find a glossary of terms. Okay, you will find information about what a process actually is versus a work instruction versus a procedure, and how they all tie together. So the wiki is enormously helpful. It's well written, very concise. You'll find all the information you need to on there about these different terms, and make sure you understand them. And Peter is quite right. Have a look back at the previous 4 episodes that we've done, because there is a lot of really, really good information, starting from literally the first word in episode 1. Yeah. John, like to add to that?
Yeah, just to mention, in addition to the wiki, if they have questions or want to get into a conversation, there's a Google chat, open chat forum that they can join as well. So that's just something to know.
Yeah, that's really helpful as well. Okay, if you want to have a conversation, you need a little bit more understanding of something, just getting into it. How do you get started? Okay, please don't hesitate to make use of those resources. They're all available to you there. All right, let's move along to our next question. And the next question is, what are the workflow patterns in the USM process model? And Jan, again, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, of course, the first question was all about the structure and the idea, the concept of having a workflow. But where the rubber meets the road, of course, is if you specify the workflows you're going to do the work with. And the concept of non-redundancy in this unique process model leads to a limited number of possible patterns through the process model. Any pattern is starting with an initiative triggered by a customer or an internal stakeholder. And it's like this one. It's always run completely till the end. So it covers everything between the trigger and the final result of whatever was requested from the organization. Now, the fact that this is a non-redundant process model leads to the fact that it's only possible to run through the model following the logic of the relationships between the processes, like between change management and operations management, in a very specific way and in a limited number of ways. And the only possible patterns in the model are these 8 patterns. For example, if you have a request to set up a service agreement or to update the service agreement, that's what we call a wish. And the wish is non-redundant with the change. So the wish uses the change to deploy anything that has been agreed. And the change does not interfere with the operation. So after specifying, developing, testing, and releasing the change, the operation is done in operation. So that makes blue, yellow, green to the preferred order. And of course, it needs to go back to the beginning to close the processes in an administrative way. And all of these examples in these 8 possible patterns cover any interaction that you can ever have with any surrounding party within the scope of the service provider.
Fantastic. And I love this diagram. And the color coding, I think, makes it so easy for people to understand the start and the endpoints, and what has to be done in between. And in fact, what happens to it as it goes along. So
that's
really,
exactly
really helpful diagram.
What's important. Nigel, if I may add,
Yeah.
People have been criticizing this. For instance, my wife said, well, this is a real childish way to present this. And I said, that is exactly what we need. We need to find a color coding that immediately visualizes the core concepts of composed workflows that are composed from building blocks in a service management process architecture.
Well, I think you successfully achieved that with this diagram, Jan. Definitely. It works well. John, I'm going to come to you next.
Yeah, it's absolutely about simplifying service management. Absolutely. And I got to be honest, like a lot of people, initially had a hard time accepting that there's only 8 workflows for any service management activity. That was not easy for me to get past. But I think it's really, really important that people recognize that the intent is to cover service management in a universally applicable way, and that these workflows are designed to allow for adaptation at a procedure or a work instruction level. And when you view in that way, that's how you get to only 8 patterns of activity. And so, again, USM's process design criteria and this concept of a routine are really important to understand. And if anyone's looking at USM, I would ask them to keep an open mind and understand what we're talking about. Don't just skim the book or take 10 minutes on the wiki. Go to the chat room and ask some questions and understand it. It's really worth understanding.
Absolutely, John. And just to, I just want to add, unfortunately, our 5th guest for today, Mikko, couldn't join us as he's feeling unwell. So, we hope that he feels better soon. But I'm going to use his phrase to refer to what John said, what he said, right? That's what Mikko usually says, and I think that's really applicable here. Go back actually and speak to people, talk to the folks. Yeah, use the Google chat, ask questions, get involved. And as John said, keep an open mind. Yeah, you wouldn't believe how simple things are when you actually understand it like this. Klaus, I'm going to jump to you next.
Yeah, as to me, the USM workflow patterns are the way from I want something to I get it. So, and you put into the service management machine a wish, a change, an incident, or service request. Then they are processed and they get materialized in operations, operate in this process. And this is where the wish hits the service reality. And to me, this is what the USM workflow patterns are.
Right. And I think what you've just said makes perfect sense. Jan, we're going to come back to you before we go to Peter.
Yeah. If you just imagine what would happen if every team in an organization or every organization in an ecosystem would use the same interfacing techniques, what would the influence on the interoperability between those parties be? That's beyond imagination, I think. That is the clue for putting everything together as links in a supply chain, as links in an ecosystem, standardizing the interfacing between the links in any ecosystem setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's really critical. Standardizing the interface between them is so important. I think all of us who've been in the service management world have had this dilemma when we've been writing processes. So understanding where they start, where they end, what happens to them in the middle, really, really important. And often we find with a lot of the other frameworks that are out there, this is not as simple as it sounds. Okay. In practice, it really becomes quite difficult, but it doesn't with USM, folks. So believe me, we've started to really live, eat, and breathe and drink this Kool-Aid. So everybody get involved. Peter, I'm going to come to you quickly for your final comments on this one.
Yeah, well, standardizing is something that is mentioned a lot in organizations, and everybody from their island are shouting, yes, we need to standardize, but for example, a trigger from a customer is a simple starting point. Learn your colleagues first to check if there is a related service agreement. And if not, it's a wish. And you start the related workflow. And if there's a service agreement, you need to check if you as a service provider needs to recover a service. So that means that the trigger is an incident. And you still have 2 types of triggers left if it is not an incident. And for example, the service request or the request for change, but in the eyes of the customer, is just a request for support. And you as service provider, you might in some case manage this request service request or as a request for change. And the solution that USM offers is very simple. If it is part of your managed infrastructure register, it becomes automatically for change. And that's why I think it's important to train people to learn them these building blocks so you can standardize.
Yep. Agreed. What you've just said makes perfect sense, Peter. I love the way you put that, actually. And the building blocks are what makes it so important and so easy to understand. Yeah. I'm just going to remind everybody again about that, okay, just to bring this diagram up, because it really does make perfect sense. And I think in the Netherlands, we call this Jop en Janneke. Huh? Yeah?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
As a member of our audience said, and we thank you for reminding us about that. It does make perfect sense. But absolutely, simplicity is the key here, folks. If you want to really excel at service management, you need to understand how to simplify things, how to react, and how to put things in the right place. That's what USM is all about. All right, so let's move on and take our next question. And our next question is, can you demonstrate how these templates cover all interactions within the system? So I think we've got a couple of examples here. So Jan, I'm going to start with you, and then we're going to move on, I think, to Peter, and then we'll come back to whoever else has more examples. So Jan, give us an example.
Okay, just let me start. We've developed, to make this simple, a simple decision tree that anyone can use. So you can determine what it is within no more than 4 questions. Now, let me give an example of a reactive and a proactive interaction. A reactive interaction does not do anything that is an improvement that is initiated by yourself, because it's reactive. It's coming from the customer. So, for instance, a frequent thing like resetting a password. The customer calls you and says, "Oh boy, I can't get in. Please give me a new password because it doesn't work anymore." Now, is that reactive or proactive? It's clear it's reactive. It comes in from the customer. Does that refer to setting up a new agreement or updating it? No, of course not. It's just something that's not working as expected by the customer. Now, next question, number 3, is it a failure or is it just something they want you to do for them? And that's where people often make a mistake, because the most often analysis of the situation is, ooh, that's an incident because the thing doesn't work. Well, that's wrong. It's not an incident. Everything works exactly as wished and as agreed, because the fool can't get in. That's exactly what we wanted, to have a secure service. If you don't have the service password anymore, you can't get in. Just imagine what would happen if you could get in. That would be a problem. So This is not an incident. This is something for question number 4. The big question here is the request changing anything in the managed infrastructure that has any influence on others or not. And of course, this is just about data. This is not about infrastructure. This is just data. So the answer is, resetting a password is a service request that's feeding the operations process. I don't want to feed all the companies that treat this as an incident and pay for the cost of user errors, because this is just a user error.
Absolutely.
The proactive one would be something that comes from internal. That's something you do to improve whatever you've agreed to do. So for instance, if you have solved an incident, and at the end of the incident workflow, you always look back, is there anything we can learn from this, as any framework would advise you? If that is indeed concluded, then that is an idea to improve something. Now, that is what we use to feed the improve process, which is actually just the exactly same thing as risk management. And of course, there's 1,000 of good ideas. So we need to prioritize this. We need to handle this in a predefined way, which means in a process determined way. There's 3 types of workflows that will take care of risk depending on the kind of measure that this requires. Well, that's 2 examples of reactive and proactive using a simple decision tree model that any help desk employee can use in future.
I love this decision tree model. I'll leave this up, Peter, while you come and give us an example next.
Yeah, well, if a user requests, for example, a change that is not covered by the service agreement, it happens a lot. And formally, you should just say, no, we're not going to do it. Or you say, we need to update the service agreement. And when the agreement has been updated and agreed, then the request will be handled as a change that is covered by the updated service agreement. And that kind of logic, instead of solving it upfront, you can do, but then you need to take risk of having an agreement out there which is not actually updated. And so always learn people, check first, what is it that we have agreed?
Good point, Peter. What is it that we have actually agreed? And you're right. It is a risk having something in the system or that has not actually been made part of that service agreement. Yeah, it's a big risk. Because when that thing goes wrong, yeah, which it inevitably will at some point, because these are usually band-aids that are put on, because somebody wanted something. It's usually a blame game of who's responsible to fix it. It's not part of the service agreement officially. So be careful about that and follow the decision tree. It makes life much, much easier. Jan, I think you've got another example, right, to give us?
I think the last question, number 4, is something that is hugely important, because many interactions always come down to whether it's a change or an operations request, a service request. And the only way to decide about that is to be sure what is the infrastructure that you want to be in control of, because you have set that up to deliver the services that you've agreed. So the only way to make a final decision for number 4 as a question is that you have a managed infrastructure register that IT people tend to call a CMDB, configuration management database, or a configuration management system, etc., that determines if you change or modify anything in here, then we must take care, because it has an effect on others. If it doesn't have any effect on others, you can do it, of course, with all the precautions that are required, but then it is simply a service request. So updating the CMDB is never part of the operate process. It's done in change, and only in change. So that's a hugely important thing. I can't, of course, come up with a term configuration management database if I talk to a number of doctors in a first line team, because they don't know what CMDB means. What they do know is the register that they need to have in place to be in charge of everything they need to be in charge of. That is a register, or whatever they call their managed infrastructure. That's why that's the term we use.
Right, which makes perfect sense. Absolutely. I think, John, you've got an example as well, right, to put in here.
Well, I think I think we've covered them all. I don't know if we covered an incident, but the incident is pretty straightforward. If something's not working, then it's a failure. We need to open up an incident. If it's not, then it's probably either a change or a service request.
Correct. And I think that's probably this decision tree. Just let me put it out there. This decision tree is a really, really important thing. If you can understand this decision tree really well and use it, actually put it into effect in your organization, it is probably one of the things that will make the most difference to the way you do your managed services on a daily basis. Okay, so make sure you understand this decision tree along with, and I'm going to put this back on again, okay, the workflows that we spoke about earlier, right? Understanding the decision tree along with these workflows will make life a lot easier. Jan.
Yeah, one of the comments is often that why do we only see risk management for everything that is covered in terms of improvement? The fact is that people are not used to interpreting risks as also positive ideas. Well, the nature of the process that's triggered in risk management is that we improve something. Very often, that is taking away a threat. That's a negative interpretation of the concept of risks. But organizing an innovation is also delivering an improvement, and the process structure of that improvement is exactly the same as the process structure of a negative thing like a threat. Well, therefore, negative and positive risks are handled in one single process. Otherwise, we would have a duplication, and we didn't want that because we needed a non-redundant process model. Well, that's why negative and positive risks are handled in one process.
Right, which makes perfect sense. John, over to you.
And the only thing I would mention is the USM coaches can conduct workshops where you can actually get your staff in a workshop and have them apply these different work streams to their particular operation, and that can be very effective to give customers the confidence that don't worry, everything can be handled in one of the 8 workflows.
You can learn it in half a day. That's
Yep.
all you
Yep.
Half a day.
half a day.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to move on because we've got lots of live questions coming up. So next question is, what is the nature of a USM workflow? So I think this one, Jan, if you can kick us off with again.
Yeah, I
it'd be
think
good.
if you look at this concept of workflow, we need to discriminate between the process level, the procedural level, and the work instruction level. I think you've got an image for that. This is one of the most important images in USM because this makes a clear difference between the dimension of a process and the dimension of a work instruction, which is the thing you do in practice. And that's where the practices of frameworks focus. They talk about the practical things you need to do, like bringing something to the cloud or any other practical issue that you are concerned of. The whole idea of USM, of course, is that every practice and therefore every work instruction and therefore every procedure can be derived from one dimension, a non-redundant process architecture. So if you ever want to have an optimum set of practices installed, you should start with the non-redundant process architecture and derive them from that architecture instead of the other way around.
Good point, Jan. And in fact, we have a whole episode on architecture. So look back in our USM series, you will find it. It's a very, very interesting episode. It explains all about architecture, what it is, more importantly, what it isn't, and also why you need one. Okay?
If I add to this image, as USM explains, there's only 5 processes. And each of these processes can be used to compose the 8 workflows at the process level of detail. Then we can add the who to the what, which means that for 5 processes, we create 5 procedures, or for 8 workflows, we create 8 procedures by explaining who does what. And from that, it explodes. You can apply that to any number of practical situations, creating any number of practices based on these 5 processes or 8 workflows.
Fantastic. And this is the type of example of building blocks that we were talking about earlier. Okay. All right. John, do you want to add something to this as well?
Well, the only thing I would add is that if you move beyond the foundation and get on a USM professional track, or if you engage a coach, you get access to these workflow templates. And the templates will give you all the process steps involved in each workflow in the right sequence. And so all you need to do is identify the appropriate people, which will identify the procedure. And then if you want to include any work instructions as needed, to identify the how. And in some cases, there's very little procedural detail even needed, other than specifying the who. And the same really applies to work instructions as well. So what I like about these templates is that it lets the stakeholders take ownership over their routines. They're actually, at the end of the day, they're their routines, which I think is very, very positive. So you can really move pretty quickly once you understand how the nature of these workflows and processes work. You really can move pretty quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you. Klaus, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do not have a mathematical proof regarding the nature of USM. For me, the consistency of the model is sort of beautiful. And in USM, you can take any use case or business transaction and process it from start to end in a consistent way. So the sound comprehensiveness of USM is what is the nature of a USM workflow for me.
Fantastic. Thank you. Peter, finish us off with this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. This image that you showed with the 3 different resources and the 3 different routines is really my favorite image in the whole material of unified storage management, because it really demystifies a lot. And so what I would recommend to do is any organization that want to move on and also want to solve this trouble of misunderstanding, use the usmwiki.com, and you can very easily make a quick start over there.
Absolutely. And just to remind you, there's a QR code on screen now. Yeah. If you need to get to the wiki,
you are fast.
The link is in the chat, by the way, in the Zoom webinar chat. So if you need to access the wiki or would like to, you can get it from there. All right. Fantastic. Thanks, Peter. Okay, we're going to move along because the questions are stacking up now. The next question is, how does the workflow relate to customer journeys and value streams? For this one, I think, Jan, we're going to kick off with you and then go to John.
We've got an image for that, I think, as well.
Oh, we definitely do.
We just explained how you can create everything the provider does in terms of people, process, and technology by combining that to either pure process or workflows and the procedures and the work instruction. Together, they are all combined in the term routines. Now, everything you do in terms of delivering services is done by means of routines. Now, what is the concept of a value stream? That is the view of the provider on everything that needs to be done from start to finish. That means that a value stream is a view on something we already had, which is the routine, on 3 levels. And in this case, a value stream most likely focuses on the practical level, covering the work instruction nature. Now, that means that in a value stream, the only thing you will find is the same stuff as we had already in place in the routines. Now, that is the perspective of the provider. The customer, however, has a very different perspective. The customer's customer journey only covers the thing the customer experiences, which is the collection of the things the customer does themselves and the thing the customer experiences from the routine. That's what we call touch points. So from all the things that are done in a value stream or a practice level routine, the customer only sees a number of touch point based interactions. Now that together is what we call the customer journey. Concluding, the customer journey and the value stream are only 2 different perspectives on the very same thing, routines at any level of detail that you want to describe them.
I love that definition. It just makes it so easy to understand. Yeah, it really, really makes it easy to understand. Thanks, Jan. John, you've got some addition to this as well. I'll leave the diagram up for you as well.
Well, I think the USM workflows are fundamentally generic value streams, and they can be used to quickly identify areas where delays are occurring or there's waste. And these details can be found typically in the lower level routines, right? The procedures and work instructions. And we can use value stream mapping techniques to identify those lower level bottlenecks.
Thanks, John. That's really, really great. We've got so many questions stacking up here. We've still got quite a few to get through. So I think let's move on. I hope that the answers there were really clear. So the next live question that we've got here is, how does the concept of capabilities fit into this? And I think we're going to stick with that diagram, actually. Yeah. And yeah, so let's start off with Jan again on that.
Yeah, well, it is already clear in the diagram. The capabilities are the things, that's the way they are defined, the things you can do or you should be able to do. That's what the definitions of capabilities are all over the place. So they don't add new resources. They describe what people can do in processes with technology, and that was already described with routines. So the capability is actually a perspective on the very same thing, the routine, at any level of detail, process, procedure, or work instruction. Therefore, a capability is something that can be used, if you want to add value, by analyzing the information in the routine. So that's how capabilities are used. They are a definition of what we could do, what we should do, what we are doing from the perspective of a value stream perspective in terms of what can we do as a company. but it doesn't add any resources, and therefore it only replicates everything that was already in here. A provider has people, process, and technology that create routines to deliver services to customers.
Perfect. I love that as well. Also, easy description. John, you want to add to this as well?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that again, USM is focused on service management. So when we talk about capabilities, we're focused on service management capabilities. That's all I'd say.
Correct. And just to make that clear, John, are you talking about IT service management, or are you talking about general service management?
No.
Any service management?
Service management, enterprise service management, not just IT.
Perfect. And that is something that I asked that question for a specific reason, okay? Because we aren't talking with USM about IT service management only. We are talking about enterprise service management. There is a difference, right?
Yeah,
that covers IT service management and every other kind of service management, basically. So think that through. That's what this covers. All right. So, Peter, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, a capability as that you see in the picture is something the system can do, as we stated earlier. It's a combination of people, process, technology, and if I take an example, for example, the National Police, maybe a bit a sensitive example now for the Dutch audience, but they facilitate, for example, a football match, and this means specific police officers trained to do crowd control with tools like horses. But there is a limitation, and for each capability, you can point out what the limited resource is. And is it the police staff, for example, or do we have enough people knowing the crowd control routines, or do we have, for example, enough horses? So capability just brings it at another level. And if you think again in process and technology, you can use the same approach.
Right. Which is perfect, which makes perfect sense too. Klaus, let's, if you want to finish us off on this one.
Yeah. To me, the term capability matches the way USM defines a service in the service agreement. And the main parts of a service agreement are the facilities and the support for those facilities. So a provider's ability to deliver the service as defined is his capability, which is rather obvious.
Right. It is. Fantastic. Okay, we've got so many questions stacking up. I'm going to just move on to the next one here, and we're running out of time. So what are the benefits of using USM in this way? Peter, kick us off on this.
Yeah, with USM, you can create the most efficient and universal structure for workflow. You can then apply that to any practice with any guidance from any framework you like. So this way you can reduce the organization's complexity and you improve the organization's interoperability, as we mentioned earlier.
Right. Wonderful. I'd like to just reiterate what Peter said there and elaborate a little bit. You can use whichever frameworks you like. We are not saying you have to throw out everything that you have already invested in. Okay. What we are saying is that you should use USM to simplify what you've got now.
Yeah.
And then you will also see your gaps. And when you see those gaps, you will be able to fill them because you'll be able to understand what is missing from this. So don't throw out everything you've got just yet. Okay? Make use of it, but start by understanding the USM model. Okay, John, if you can add to that, if you don't mind.
Well, I think for me, the main benefit of using USM in value stream mapping is the generic value streams are based on customer orientation, number one. They're non-redundant, and they integrate both service and support activities, as Klaus mentioned. And so this allows you to ensure a holistic approach to optimizing your services. And so that can be very effective in value stream management.
Very effective, absolutely. Thanks, John. Jan, over to you for the final comments on this one.
The benefits, I think, is something you already mentioned it by saying that if you want to use guidance from best practice frameworks, any resource that you prefer, then you can start doing whatever's in there, but that is only covering the outside, your symptoms. That's an outside-in approach. If you really want to create a sustainable future and a smooth engine for yourself, you will start by creating the engine and then applying that to any guidance you want to select from any combination of resources. May it be SIAM or ITIL or a standard like 27,000 or 20,000. Anything in there is about doing the practice. Now, the big question is always, what is the management system you created to deliver those practices? And those sources simply don't specify that. Well, that's where USM kicks in. USM complements everything that is missing in the best practice frameworks approach.
What he said is all I can say to that. Sorry, John, I'm putting you in frame. What he said to echo Mikko. All right, fantastic, thank you. Let's move on to another question here, which is, how can an organization start with this in practice? And Jan, you've had a lot of experience doing this, so we'll go Jan, John, Klaus, if you don't mind. So Jan, kick us off.
This is all about rethinking everything you've been doing. It always starts with a knowledge transfer. You must put some energy in understanding the structure of architecture and systems to deliver any services you want. So the most important component of a architectural approach is, first of all, the vocabulary. Get your vocabulary straight. Yeah. If you don't have your terminology straight, you will not be understood in service value chains, streams, ecosystems, or whatever. And then you create your building blocks from whatever resource you want, and then you add the rules to apply the building blocks. Now, it starts with knowledge transfer, and of course you can have 3 types of knowledge transfer. You can read a book, you can go to the wiki, and of course if you want to spend some more energy on it and really understand it, you go to a training. We only have a single training, a 2-day foundation course. That's all you need to completely understand this. And by the end of the year, we will have a self-paced e-learning platform, so you can do it in your own time at your own pace. I think that's how you can learn to organize your way of delivering your services from wherever you are.
Great news. And Jan just let the cat out of the bag there in public, that there is a self-paced e-learning course that'll be here soon. So follow this, watch this space for more information. Good news there. John, over to you.
Yeah, I would say everything he said, right? But I would recognize that what we're talking about is a method, right? And in order to apply the method, you need to understand the concepts that we're talking about. So take the foundation training, move on to USM professional certification if you need to, or engage a coach, take some workshops. And I think as you do that, number one, you'll get access to free resources that the SURVUZ Foundation provides, and you'll be able to either do it on your own or get some help along the way. So understand it's a method that you can apply that'll become routine for your enterprise. And you need to understand it in order to apply the method.
Yeah, absolutely. It is important to realize it is a method. Okay? It is not a framework. It is indeed a method. So, okay, let's move on to Klaus, if you don't mind.
Yes. My recommendation for implementation is to create a USM laboratory. So this is a demarcated, limited area in your organization where you can give it a try with USM building blocks we already mentioned here, like a glossary, workflows, and other things, and see in this area if it matches to your culture and adjust it accordingly if so necessary. And after that, if it's successful, you can take another department and grow with USM. And so this would be an incremental way of working, an agile way. So you limit the risk of organizational change. And that's my recommendation to start.
Fantastic. I love that. Kind of creating a safe sandbox to work in, right? So it won't impact anything. Yeah. Really, really good way of doing it. So, Klaus, fantastic idea there. Okay, we got a couple of live questions, quite a few actually come in. So let's jump straight into them. I think this one should be fairly easy. We did cover this a little bit more, a little bit earlier on, but can you elaborate on why improvements are risk management? Jan, I'm going to come to you on this because I think you did cover this a little bit earlier, but maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more.
I think I already explained that a risk, even in the theory of risk management, can always be explained as a negative thing or a positive thing. Negatively is taking care of a threat, positively is kicking in an innovation. Both lead to the exact same result, which is an improvement of what you had. The logical order of things you need to do are exactly the same. So in terms of process management, there's only one process to cover negative and positive improvements, which is the term improve, a verb that we use for that.
There we go. Perfect. Anybody else want to add anything, panel, to this one? I think that covered it pretty clear.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. I hope that answered your question, Donovan. Okay, so let's take a look at this now. How do you look at the changes which are in fact often not only IT based, but also business changes? How does USM align with those business/IT changes? Interesting question.
Yeah. Shall I take that one?
Yeah, please go ahead, Peter.
And well, the thing is that this USM approach is not only for the IT organization. So by explaining it to the business, they can have their own change management as well, and starting up their own routines. And the beauty is they will understand the IT department better, even if you agree to do it with your suppliers. So use it in all the places, and you will talk the same language.
Yeah. And that's great advice, Peter. The funny thing is, in my experience, the business is usually much, much more mature than IT anyway. Okay? When it comes to changes, when it comes to how they implement changes, how they do this, they're often more mature because they've been doing this for a lot longer than IT have. But there are many newer businesses that will struggle with this concept. Jan, jump in there if you don't mind.
It's a short one. USM specifies the concept of the link in a non-IT way, which is a generic universal way. Every service organization, every team in a service organization does the exact same things if you look at the interfacing with their customers, their environment. They have a wish, a change, an incident, and a service request, and internally they have a risk to improve things from their own initiative. Each team can be using the very same management system in terms of the interfacing with the others. Therefore, USM is not limited to IT or whatever specific single environment. It is defined for the enterprise, or we use it in the Netherlands in a nationwide system, in an ecosystem for public services, or something like
right. That. Perfect. John, your final comments on this one.
Yeah. Again, it's based on systems thinking. And the management system that USM creates feeds governance, and that helps remain aligned. And so it's actually a perfect fit.
Yeah, it's absolutely perfectly aligned. So it is really, really good. Okay, let's move on because our questions are stacking up here a little bit, and we are running out of time. So this should be a quick one. Are the terms used mappable to the ArchiMate? Jan, you've already know this.
Yeah, we have mapped USM into ArchiMate. And the thing is that ArchiMate is not a management system technology. ArchiMate is defined in the environment of technology and data. So it is not perfectly aligned to management systems, to system thinking. So you can map everything in USM in ArchiMate, but you will probably run into some terminological, some semantic issues that makes ArchiMate not the ideal tool to describe USM's logic.
Right.
They can pull it off. We've done it. It's going to be working perfectly. But I think we should use our own way of describing logic in terms of management systems.
Perfect. Thanks, Jan. Okay, let's move forward unless anybody else wants to add to that. No? Okay, good. Let's move on to the next one. Next question is, Is it aligned with USM thinking that value streams focus on the provider's actions, even though value is created by the customers consuming the service? Or am I misunderstanding this? Yes, Donabed, I'm going to hand it to Jan.
Well, that's a concept from Nigel, that co-creation of value. Of course, value is created on both sides. The thing that a service provider does is that it creates something that can be of benefit to the customer. So the customer also creates value, and it's in the interaction that we create the value. But of course, the provider provides something. Now, that is something that needs to be done before the consumer can create their own value. The thing that is in the interaction is the value stream, or the workflow in our perspective, which is exactly the same. The details that must be covered by the provider are in that value stream. Now, the provider's perspective on the things that need to be done is value stream. The customer only sees a small portion of that, the thing he experiences, and that's what we call the customer journey of the value stream or of the workflow logic.
And the routine, indeed. Yeah. Absolutely.
Type of
just to keep it simple, just call it workflows.
Yeah. True. Okay, we're going to take our final question for today, which is, how does USM link into the EDGY framework? Do we know? Anybody?
I thought I knew them all, but I'm really
this one's new.
I'm not familiar.
What is the EDGY framework?
No idea. And on that happy note, we will move straight along, and we'll come back to you on that one. My friend Cale, sorry about that. We don't know that framework, so you've stumped about a collective 160 years worth of experience when you add us all up. However, we will come back to you on that one at a later stage. All right. So that was, unfortunately, folks, we have run out of time on today's event. Thank you so much for all of your questions. We really appreciate it. I just want to walk around the panel and get your closing remarks, if you don't mind. Jan, if I can start with you.
Yeah, I think that I said it before. Rethink and get your vocabulary straight. So anytime anyone is confronting you with a new term, think about it. Do you already know that? And if so, please just use the new term as a label, but don't throw away the logic of the things you already had. We've been able to demonstrate that anything you need to do is in the people, process, and technology approach to any type of routine of a level of process, procedure, work instruction to deliver any service you want. And you can come up with any kind of labels and relabeling of those concepts. It doesn't add much to the whole equation, except for that you can perhaps do an improvement in terms of analyzing what you already had. It doesn't replace what you already had.
Perfect. Thank you, Jan. Peter, what are your final closing remarks?
Well, what I notice when I train organizations in the USM methodology, it's sometimes a bit overwhelming, and they say, do we have to learn all these new wording and phrases and definitions? But you can also keep a couple of own definitions and integrate it so that you get familiar. The whole thing is that you agree what the meaning is of a specific term, like a process, for example. Yeah.
Right. Makes perfect sense. John, what are your closing remarks for today?
I'd echo Stephen Covey. Seek first to understand, right? Understand the USM method. And I think if you understand that and you open up your mind, you'll be able to change the status quo.
Right. Makes perfect sense. Klaus, your final comments for today.
Get in touch with USM, study it, and you will find the beauty in it.
You will. You absolutely will. So I just want to echo what everybody said there. Get in touch. Go and pop onto the wiki. Okay? Everything is on the wiki. You will see that if you click on or go to this link, just scan it on your phone, okay? Or look into the Zoom chat. You'll find the link to the wiki. There is a lot of information there. Start at the beginning, start reading, get in touch with us if you have any questions. Hook up with us on LinkedIn, okay? Not a problem. All of our profiles are, in fact, on the APMG events page for any of the events. Go to our YouTube channel and you will find all of the previous events as well for USM. So great resource there as well. So I just want to say thank you to the panel for today. You guys were wonderful once again. So right now, though, we need to move on, I'm afraid, and end off. So I'm just going to close our show out here by reminding everybody that over on our website, you can search for the answers to over 3,000 questions. It's a great free resource, free learning resource, connects you with experts from all around the world, okay? So don't forget about that. Also, looking ahead, tomorrow, or actually the Thursday, the 20th, we have at 1600 GMT, the APMG Partner Spotlight. What is business resilience? That's going to be quite an interesting one. That should be a nice event to watch. And on Tuesday, the 10th, we will be doing our final USM series for this year, which will be the Universal Process Model for Service Management. So thank you, everybody. We will see you on the next event, and have a great weekend when it comes.